This episode was brought to you by Pentester Academy, the leader in online cybersecurity education. Join over 10,000 professionals from 90 countries to learn security online. Also brought to you by Hacker Arsenal, artillery for cyber warriors. Visit us on hackerarsenal.com to check out our latest attack defense gadgets. I'm Marley Oxenholm from Pentester Academy TV, and welcome to our show, Access Point, where we spotlight cybersecurity companies and give an inside look at the people and technology behind the latest advancements in the industry.
I'm joined today by Grant Elliott, who is CEO and co-founder of the company Ostendio. Thank you for joining me today.
I'm delighted to be here.
Awesome. I'm excited to learn more about the company, so let's get started then. So can you tell us about the founding story of Ostendio? How did the company get started?
Sure. So I used to be the former Chief Operations Officer and Chief Information Security Officer of a digital health company. And I spent many years going through various different types of audits, having to help develop our entire security posture from the ground up. And it just kind of struck me that there had to be a simpler way than the way we were doing it. We were kind of pulling together a whole bunch of different systems, processes, using our intranet, using our ticket management system, trying to source help wherever we could. And I was always a little bit amazed that, although we did a pretty good job developing a reasonably mature and robust environment to manage our security, there seemed to be a lot of early first step mistakes and not a lot of support. And one of the things you learn when you're developing a security program is it's one thing to learn what to do, but then when you realize that you've now taken on 1,000 tasks that have to be performed on a routine basis, managing all that activity and demonstrating you're doing and operating against it can become challenging. So I was kind of looking for almost like a Salesforce type tool that kind of managed for security, and there really just didn't seem to be anything in the marketplace. We looked at some of the more expensive GRC tools like EMCR, but they were out of our price list and clunky and difficult to install. And then there were lots of other kind of bespoke type solutions that were single regulatory solutions like HIPAA type solutions or PCI type solutions, but nothing that kind of pulled together the entire workflow of the security profile. So with that in mind, I spoke to a number of people that I was working with. We were going through lots of audits and asked them if they were experiencing the same issues, and many of them did. So the idea of kind of developing as I said, a kind of Salesforce for security came up, and one day I just decided to take the jump and see if we could do it.
Awesome. That's great. And now tell me exactly what the company does. What would be the elevator pitch? Sure.
Well, obviously the top line is the security for Salesforce, or Salesforce for security. Basically, in order for you to operate your security program, there's three things you have to do. One, you have to understand a pathway to building a mature program. Secondly, you have to operate it. So everything from distributing documents, conducting training, tracking and managing assets, onboarding, offboarding employees. There's a host of things that you have to operationally do across the organization. So our platform manages all those workflows for you. And then finally, you have to be able to demonstrate to various different stakeholders that you're operating in compliance with a specific standard or regulation. So if you're in healthcare, you're trying to map to HIPAA. If you're operating in the EU today, then obviously GDPR is coming into play. But if you're going through routine audits like SOC 2 or ISO 27001 or any other of a host of different standards and regulations, you need to be able to demonstrate that you're not only you've built out a whole bunch of policies and procedures mapped to that standard, but you're operating and performing against it. You'll be able to demonstrate management oversight and organizational compliance. And so our platform helps you, effectively understand, develop and build your security program. It operates it for you across the entire organization. And then it allows you to be able to demonstrate to any stakeholder that's interested that you're operating in line with a particular standard or regulation.
Very nice. Seems like it takes a lot of the effort out as well. I like that.
That's the idea. Ultimately, the whole concept is if we can't simplify what you're doing, then we're not doing our job. Too many of the types of tools that operate in this space, they're kind of overlay tools. So you're doing it as well as your job. Our platform is designed to kind of be your primary workflow. So not only does it help you demonstrate you're doing the right things, it makes it easier for you to do it as well.
Very nice. I love that. And now I'm curious, what differentiates your solution from other platforms available right now in the market?
Well, one of the key differentiators is we roll the platform out to everyone within the organization. So, whether you're a 10-person organization or a 10,000-person organization, everyone is interacting with the platform. The reason that is such a differentiator is because most tools that operate in this space they typically have a small team that's pulling information from third-party systems, and then they're implementing or managing that data. So the opportunity exists to basically manipulate or massage that data, if we want to clean it up or change it. Our platform, because it actually takes the data direct from source, so it's that IT engineer that's performing the patch, or it's the HR manager that's basically doing the employee audit, or it's the individual within the organization that's taking the training. They're actually interacting and providing that information into the platform directly. So when we actually pull information, the information is coming from source. So if you were to try and manipulate that information, you have to have the entire organization complicit in the manipulation. So it means that the information is more trustable.
And now I'm curious, just, given your experience and everything, I'm wondering how the threat landscape has changed over the past few years, in your opinion.
Yeah, no, it really has. And I think this is something that people should definitely be aware of. 10, 15 years ago, there really still was a focus on what we call perimeter protection. People would do the kind of whole drawbridge and waterproof. They assumed that data resided within a particular environment, and you could protect data, almost like you protect Fort Knox, right?
Yeah.
Today, data isn't, in one place, right? Data is everywhere. More and more of your vendors today are cloud-based vendors, and they're actually hosting and managing your data on your behalf. And so one fundamental change is just where the data is. It's everywhere. And so you really have to manage security around who's accessing whatever type of data. Vendor management becomes critical and important. The other thing that's fundamentally changed, and again, 10, 15 years ago, and this goes with the whole sort of protection of the environment, is the threat landscape changed as well. So, it used to be that you'd be attacked or targeted based on the value of the information that you stored. And so if you were a bank, they would go after the banks. If you're a healthcare organization, they would go after the healthcare information. But today, you're attacked based on what you advertise on the internet. So if you're operating a software that isn't patched or has some sort of vulnerability, then there are many, many, many tools out there that are simply doing nothing more than scanning the internet, looking for those vulnerabilities. So the reason that changes it is because, previously you could take the whole protection of the herd mentality. You think, well, I don't really have that much valuable data, so it's less likely someone's going to attack me. So my risk profile is probably quite low because who am I? Whereas today that's fundamentally changed because, all you have got to do is operate some obsolete software and you could be the victim of attack or a ransomware attack as well. And so that's really changed as well. And the third thing I'd just say is phishing, right? The ability for you to now exploit networks through simply an employee clicking a link. So all of those three things have really kind of combined to change the threat landscape today, right? You can't simply just assume that you're putting your data in a vault and it's going to be protected. The data is now everywhere, so you have to track where the data is. The attacks are coming based on whether you're the vulnerabilities you're exposing. And every single employee today is a potential threat vector into your organization, so you have to take care of them all.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you on that. And speaking of attacks, I was wondering, with so many organizations under attack, what do you see as their biggest concern, and what are some ways that they should be defending themselves?
I think really, when I talk to CIOs, I talk to CEOs all the time, and I really think that one of the biggest areas that organizations are really vulnerable on is I think they're not taking security seriously as they need to. We kind of divide organizations into kind of two types. There's the kind of large multinational, the sort of top 1% of organizations. And if you go to trade shows, you go to events, you're going to see the CIO or the CISO of a multinational organization talking about the threat landscape and talking about the amount of money that they spend on improving their environment. And if you look at the way that the market on cybersecurity is growing, I mean, there's billions of dollars being spent in this industry. But unfortunately, most of that money's been spent by that top 1%. The remaining 99% of organizations, most of the organizations that exist out there, they're not doing nearly enough, right? They're not allocating sufficient budget to cybersecurity. They tend to think it's too hard. They tend to think that it's going to happen regardless. When the reality is, there's lots of very basic and simple things that any organization can do that's not really going to cost them a lot of money. They can significantly improve their cyber profile. And so really, I think that sort of lack of focus, that lack of attention of those organizations is kind of what I see as the biggest threat, because they really need to be spending more time, investing in doing just the basics.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. And a lot of times it becomes a too little too late scenario and they care after, they've lost a lot of information. So absolutely, we really need to start caring sooner rather than later.
Well, and I think it's important because, I mean, again, that's a great point that you raised, which is the whole concept of when do you focus your energy from a cyber perspective? And look, if you look at some of the most recent hacks that were occurred, they've typically been going on for 18 months, 24 months. So
Yep.
when I ask organizations today whether they've had any security incident, they'll normally confidently say no. But really, that's not that they know of. I mean, again, many of these professional cyber hackers will sit in your network for a significant period of time.
Mm-hmm.
So organizations are being hacked today and they don't even know that it's happening. But the other part to that is that, sure, prevention is a big part of building a cybersecurity program, but identification and then remediation are just as important. It's important to understand and know that you understand that you have been hacked and be in a situation where you can identify that. But then the question is, what do you do when an incident doesn't happen? Do you have already laid out business continuity, disaster recovery plans? Do you have risk mediation plans already in place so that you know what to do when that happens? And most organizations don't. They focus again on, we're going to prevent people coming in, but they don't think about the fact that, well, that's probably likely to happen, so now what do you do to remediate that?
Yeah, absolutely. Prevention is great, but like you said, you need an action plan afterward just in case.
Absolutely. And any organization can do that. That doesn't cost a lot of money to at least draw up a plan.
No, not at all. And I know you kind of touched on it briefly, but what sort of compliance challenges do you help organizations solve?
Well, as I mentioned there before, a big part of the issue for some organizations is not knowing what to do, not knowing where to start. There's a tendency, I think, organizations have to think that this is too big a problem to solve, and so this. One of the ways that we address that is we have a proprietary implementation process. We take people through a 5-step implementation checklist. So we work on a foundational layer of security, intermediate, proficient, advanced, and then fully certified. And the idea really there is that, the foundational layer is not that difficult for any organization. It's put some basic governance in place, some simple training, some high-level policies and procedures. Now, you're not going to be completely secure if you have a foundational layer of security in place, but it's a starting point. It lets your employees understand that you take it seriously, and it gets you, to begin that journey. Obviously, as you move to intermediate, proficient, and advanced, we get much more sophisticated in terms of how we help you prevent or build up your security posture. But the idea is we break it into manageable chunks so that any organization can move at their own pace and can implement things in a manageable and cost-effective way. So that's a big area we can try and help organizations. We try and make it a little bit less scary. But as I mentioned earlier on, as part of the problem is, what happens with a lot of organizations is they then start to realize, well, hold on, I've now just taken on a task list of 100 or 1,000 things, and I'm not that big of an organization. So tracking that in a calendar, trying to track that in a ticket management system is really, really complex. And then being able to demonstrate that people are actually doing what they need to do can be challenging as well. So our platform automates all of that as well. So we make it a lot simpler for them to track and manage. We have this concept we call always audit ready. The idea basically being that because the platform is maintaining all the activities and keeping people current and keeping people compliant, then management can sort of sit back and just manage by exception, knowing that anytime they want to go in and check, anytime they need to conduct an audit, anytime a customer comes in and asks them for specific information, they can literally just go in and interrogate the platform, and they can actually show how they are at that moment in time and manage it accordingly.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, as you mentioned, I know half the reason that a lot of companies don't even know where to begin is just they don't even know how to wrap their heads around it and where do they even start. So it seems like you guys are definitely simplifying the process. That's nice.
Obviously, the organizations need to be motivated to do something, but when they are, it kind of works well. And then, for organizations that really understand what they're doing, we work with organizations that have already implemented a very complex, very sophisticated cyber program. What we do is we just focus on mapping that onto our platform, and we simplify the operation of it as well. So again, one might argue that our platform is even more suited to that environment because, again, fundamentally, we're taking the complexity out of a lot of that and simplifying a lot of that operation. Right.
And now, how exactly do you evaluate an organization's risk?
So we'll typically do some form of gap assessment. We normally ask in the company information about, what size are they, what type of data are they managing. People have an assumption that maybe you're in healthcare, so the only thing you need to care about is HIPAA. But organizations have valuable data across. I mean, their employees have personal information about themselves that is valuable. You have financial bank accounts and financial records. You might have proprietary source code. So any organization of any size has some form of valuable data. So the first thing you need to do is understand what data do we have, how valuable it is, segment that data into buckets as to secret versus confidential versus generally open information. And then you have to understand, okay, well, what's the risk of that data being breached? We look at these in three ways. We look at, general security. Is someone going to take that data in a way that I don't want them, they're not supposed to have it? We look at availability, right? What's the impact to my business if that information is no longer available? You can imagine in a healthcare situation that can be quite significant. Yeah. And then there's integrity, right? Does someone have the ability to change and manipulate this data? Is my software development process ensuring that the information, the output that's been created is correct? Again, take a healthcare situation. If I'm a surgeon operating on someone and the data I'm relying on in my EHR is incorrect for some reason, that can have kind of life or death implications. So we'll kind of look at their environment with all of those things in mind, and then we'll recommend a particular level of security. But at the end of the day, it's risk-based, right? And this is why there's not a one-size-fits-all approach, because, a factor in this is also the how risk-averse the particular organization or the founder is. Some organizations, are willing to work with a level of risk, and then you speak to other CEOs and they don't want any risk at all. But it's all about a risk balance, because you're trying to get the right level of risk for the level of data you have, and then manage it accordingly.
Yeah, absolutely. And you really have to sit there and think of every possible solution, like you said, because you never know. And so now, speaking of organizations, what kind of companies are adopting your solution? And can you talk about a case study in which you were able to help one of them out?
Sure. I mean, so there's lots of organizations, different types. We've got a lot of traction in industries that have a need to demonstrate that they're doing things. So healthcare is a good example. Okay. Obviously, government compliant, government contractors have to demonstrate things like NIST 800-171. So any organization that operates in a space where they have to demonstrate to either their customers or to a regulator or industry that they're operating in a particular mode, that kind of fits in with our organizations. But, I can give you a couple of examples. So we have a small medical company that provides support to hospitals. And for them, they were struggling to basically sell their solution to various different large providers, because those providers were looking for innovative solutions, but they didn't want to take risk on working with a smaller organization that might not be able to protect their data. So our ability to basically give them or help them build their security program, but more importantly, demonstrate it in a really a complete way that was allowed them to actually impress their customers that they actually had everything, that were taking it seriously, actually allowed them to close multiple new sales and multiple new deals, because again, they were able to get that specific sales objection. Another much larger organization was going through a process called High Trust, which is a very complex healthcare set of standards. And they were really struggling to try and track and maintain all the activities that they needed to do on an ongoing basis. And so we were able to go on and help them. They'd already gone through the High Trust process initially. But again, you have to redo that process every 24 months. And so they were struggling after they'd gone in and made all these promises that they do all this stuff. Then the question was, well, how do we do this now? We've basically said we do all this. How do we now operationally continue to do this? So again, we were able to come in and say, we'll show them how the automating of our tool was allow them to do this without adding 3, 4, 5 different resources.
Wow, that is huge. That made a serious big difference in both of those companies. That's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, and again, it's the case, we don't just save costs, because obviously operationally we're more efficient. But again, in those situations, we're able to demonstrate that we can actually help a company generate revenue, because it allows them to close deals that might otherwise be difficult for them to do so. Yeah,
cost is huge, but at the end of the day, there's so much more as well that can be lost.
Exactly. And that doesn't even take into account the underlying risk that if a breach occurred. So clearly what we're doing makes them less likely to experience a breach, or if they do, be able to respond more effectively. And there's all sorts of potential regulatory fines or costs that they potentially could have if they had a breach. So it's difficult for us to capture that because there's no quantifiable cost there, but clearly we are reducing our overall risk as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And now lastly, what developments can we expect to see down the line from your team, and what does the company roadmap look like?
Sure. Well, I mean, again, it's really interesting when we go back to when we first started the company with a simple philosophy. We try and stay true to that simple philosophy, which is Our objective is to try and make security and compliance affordable and accessible to any organization, regardless of size. So a lot of what we do with regards to the development pipeline is really kind of focused on that single mission. Some of the things we're doing in the short term is we're looking to really expand our capability to support multiple standards and regulations. So we can currently support over 100 standards and regulations around the world. So if you are trying to operate in the US, but then you need to be compliant to GDPR, or you're operating in Japan or Finland or wherever, we can help you map the specific functions that you perform against the kind of local domestic security requirements there as well. Then another thing I'm really excited about is obviously the use of things like blockchain. Because we are tracking and managing almost on a daily basis what we call the security DNA of an organization. Mm-hmm. And because these organizations are kind of using that information to not only get certified through independent certification firms, but also as evidence to their customers that they're operating a compliant manager. The idea of basically now building that into a kind of smart contract, building onto the blockchain, into a digital ledger, is quite a compelling concept. And we spoke to a number of people with the possibility of doing that. And so if you can imagine the situation sometime in the future where if I want to do business with a smaller entity, I simply just ask them to share with me a digital certificate with already predefined SLAs built into it, so that on a day-to-day basis, if they actually fail their security SLAs, then there's impacts on the contract, financial penalties, potentially even termination of the contract and termination of the access of the information as well. So that's really a huge boon for large organizations looking to work with smaller ones. And then for smaller organizations, why would they do it? Well, they would do it because, again, they can differentiate themselves. They can theoretically work with much larger organizations, with that organization having confidence that they're being serious about their security.
That is incredible. Grant, I'm excited for all that. Sounds really interesting. Thank you so much for sitting down and speaking with me today. Appreciate it.
No problem. Again, there's a lot that we're doing, and it's been an exciting ride over the last few years, and it doesn't look like it's going to stop anytime soon. So we're just tremendously grateful to have the opportunity to help as many companies as we do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so grateful to have got to sit down with you and learn more about it as well. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. I enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
All right. Take care. We'll speak to you soon.
Also, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook so you don't miss out on any of the latest cybersecurity news. This episode is brought to you by Pentester Academy, the leader in online cybersecurity education. Join over 10,000 professionals from 90 countries to learn security online. Also brought to you by Hacker Arsenal, artillery for cyber warriors. Visit us on hackerarsenal.com to check out our latest attack defense gadgets. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.